Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am J.P. Dimri, retired professor of Russian from the Center of Russian Studies, English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. Today we shall do in Indian grammatical tradition Pioneer linguistics. Now we shall do the second module. The title of the second module is Phonetic Study in Siksās and Prātisākhyas. The objective of this module is to acquaint students with the phonetic observations in siksās and prātisākhyas. I shall make it clear here that I shall be giving only the basic things discussed in siksās and prātisākhyas, because our main aim is to introduce the Pioneer linguistics. So, as was observed, that the interest in the study of language deepened during the period of Brahmanas, and the first branch of Vedangas to attain the independent status of a discipline was phonetics. During Brahmana period, the mantras, the verses of Vedas, were preserved orally. When towards the end of Brahmana period, it was noticed that the spoken language was differing away from the Vedic one, a necessity was felt to preserve the language of Vedas strictly in terms of their inner substance as well as the external form. It was therefore felt necessary to work out proper rules of pronunciation and accentuations of Vedic mantras. Thus came into existence the discipline of phonetics, which was called siksā. The nature, now we shall speak about the nature and scope of siksā. The traditional term for phonetics is siksā. The term siksā was first used by Taittiriya Upanishad. It enumerates 6 elements of this discipline, and they are varna, individual sounds, swara, accent, matra, quantity, bala, articulation, santana, samana, recital, delivery, chanting, and santana, connection, laws of sandhis. The aim of this discipline called siksā was to teach correct pronunciation of sounds. It also dealt with the accent, quantity, and chanting of Vedic mantras. The scope of siksā was further developed into general phonetics. There is another term in the tradition referring to study of sounds. The term is called prātisākhyas. Prātisākhyas, it is said, refers to applied phonetics, and the term siksā implies general phonetics. The principles of general phonetics were applied by the prātisākhyas to Vedic text. It should be emphasized here that the advent of prātisākhyas, the interest in the general principle of phonetics was further developed. Siksās and their number and chronology. Siddheshwar Verma mentions as many as 65 siksās and states that he himself has examined 50 of these siksās. Verma classifies siksās as follows: the general siksā, the siksā of Rig Veda, the siksā of the white Shukla Yajurveda, the siksā of black Krishna Yajurveda, the siksā of the Samaveda, and the siksā of Atharva Veda. Verma places the prātisākhyas in the period of 500 to 150 BC and the siksās around 800 to 500 BC. Now we shall here enumerate some of the important siksās, and they are Swaravyanjana siksā, Paniniya siksā, Yajnavalkya siksā, Vashishti siksā, Parasari siksā, Mandavi siksā, Amoghānandi siksā, Madhyandini siksā, Varna Ratna Deepika siksā, Keshava siksā, Charayaniya siksā, Bharadwaj siksā, Vyas siksā, बोधायन शिक्षा, आपिशली शिक्षा, नारद शिक्षा, लोमशी शिक्षा, गौतमी शिक्षा, मांडुकी शिक्षा, etc. Of these shikshas, Swarvyanjana shiksha belongs to Rigveda, Narada shiksha, Lomashi shiksha, and Gautami shiksha belong to Samaveda, and Manduki shiksha belongs to Atharvaveda. Rest of the shikshas belong to Yajurveda. It is interesting to note that many of these shikshas are just catalogues of certain sounds in the Vedas and contain very little information from the standpoint of phonetics. For example, the Mandavi Shiksha gives just a list of words in Yajurveda containing the consonant Ba, and the Bharadwaj Shiksha catalogues certain words containing different sounds in an alphabetical order. It is interesting to note that the Yajnavalkya Shiksha, in order to have a correct pronunciation, enumerates the following points. First, sound health, calm temperature, freedom from nervousness, abstention from omission of sounds, overstress, singing and faltering tone, beginning and end of the speech to be consistently distinct, abstention from the habit of roughness, projecting the lips, indistinct pronunciation, nasal tongue, broken speech, and rigidity of the language. Good teeth and lips. And the last point, clear throat. This Shiksha also gives interesting instructions for teaching of accent and the relation of accent and quantity. Among all the Shikshas, the Pani Shiksha is the most important one and has two recessions belonging to the Rigveda and Yajurveda. Traditionally, Pani Shiksha is considered to be the oldest one among the Shiksha. It wielded great influence over the other Shikshas which borrowed freely from it. Principles of phonetics propounded by the Pani Shiksha said to be common to all the Vedas. Pani Shiksha is composed in the sloka verse style. There are conflicting views with regard to the authorship of Pani Shiksha. It is not certain as to whether Pani himself was the author of Pani Shiksha. However, the tradition ascribes the authorship of the Pani Shiksha to Pingala, the younger brother of Panini. Pingala promises to profess the opinion of Pani. Pani Shiksha opens with the words At Shiksham Pravakshami Pani Matam Yatha Sastrano Purvam Tad Vidya Yathoktam Lokavedayo. Now I shall explain the Shiksha as per the doctrine of Pani as received from the tradition. It is interesting to note that the verses 6 to 10 discuss the process of speech production. And they are Atma Buddhya Sametyarthan Mano Yungte Vivakshaya Manah Kaya Nimahanti Sa Prerayati Marutam Marutas Purascharan Mandram Janetswaram Pratas Savana Yogam Tam Chandu Gayatrimasritam Kanthe Madhyandani Yugam Madhyamam Trashtubhanugam Taram Tarti Savanam Shirshanyam Jagatanugam Sodilno Murdhanya Veto Vaktramapadya Marutaha Varnan Janete Tesam Vivaga Panchadasmritaha Swaratah Kalatah Sthanat Priyatnan Pradhanatah Iti Varna Vidah Prahur Nipunam Tanyabodhata. Now I shall give the translation of these four as given by W.S. Allen in his book. The soul apprehending things with the intellect inspires the mind with the desire to speak. The mind then excites the bodily fire, which in its turn impels the breath. The breath circulating in the lungs is forced upwards and impinging upon the head, reaches to the speech organs and gives rise to speech sounds. These are classified in 5 ways: by tone, by length, by place of articulation, by process of articulation by secondary features. Thus, the phoneticians have taken careful heed with this translation from Allen's book. Panini Siksha has 65 verses describing process of its production, principles of classification of sounds, nature of accent and its types, etc. As was said earlier, that our aim is only to give the introductory information about these siksās. So we have given this about the most important siksha called Panini Siksha, which is used today also. Now we shall speak about prātisākhyas, their number and chronology. As was stated, that the term siksha refers to general phonetics and term prātisākhyas to applied one. The original term used for prātisākhyas was partial, which signified that the treatise in question belonged to a social group, parishad, or groups in which the general principles of phonetics were adapted to a particular Vedic text. Each of the Veda has its own prātisākhyas as follows. Rig Veda has Rig Prātisākhyas, Yajurveda means black, Krishna Yajurveda has Taittiriya Prātisākhyas, Yajurveda, Shukla Yajurveda has Vajasaniyi or Katyayaniya Prātisākhyas, Samaveda has Rig Tantra Vyakarana, Athara Veda has Athara Prātisākhyas or Shaunakya Chaturadhyayika. The aims of the Prātisākhyas were to explain the rules of vowels and consonant sandhi, rules of accentuation, pronunciation, and syllabification. The Veda reciters had to learn to constitute the continuous text, Sangita Patha, from the word-to-word text, Pada Patha, minutely following the rules of sandhi, accentuation, pronunciation, and syllabic division. Mispronunciation was not tolerated, and the person committing a mistake in pronunciation was threatened to descend to the hell of Kumbhi Paka. On the other hand, a competent student pronouncing the mantras correctly was allowed to sit in the company of the teachers. As W.S. Allen puts it, following the Prātisākhyas, he says, I quote, the phonetic observation of Prātisākhyas were far more to the point than anything achieved in Europe before the last quarter of the 19th century, when largely under the influence of Prātisākhyas, modern phonetics emerged as a science, unquote. One of the commonly used Prātisākhyas is Taittiriya Prātisākhyas. It has 24 chapters. The first chapter deals with the Varna Samamnaya, means alphabets or sounds. The first rule reads as Atvarna Samamnaya. Here begins the list of sounds. The second chapter is related to phonetic phenomena. It has 42 rules basically dealing with the production and articulation of speech sounds. We shall here discuss some of the rules so that one has the idea about the treatise. The first rule of the chapter 2 reads as At Sabdotpattihi. Here begins the origin, production of sounds. The second rule talks about the airstream mechanism. It reads as Vayu Sarir Samiranat Kantotkarsa Sandhane. By the setting in motion of the air by the body at the junction of throat and breast. The third rule states Tasya Prātisākhyani Bhavatyurha Kantha Shiro Mukham Nasike iti. The parts which give it audible quality are breast, throat, head, mouth, and nostrils. The fourth rule states Samvrite Kanthe Nada Kriyate. When the throat is closed, tone is produced. The next sutra states Vivrate swaraha, when it is opened, breath is produced. And the sixth one states madhye hakaraha, when in an intermediate position, the ho sound is produced. These few rules demonstrate an idea how the Taittiriya prātisākhyas describes production of speech sounds. We have here used the English translation given by Hutti. It will be extremely useful for the students of linguistics in general and for the students of phonetics in particular to get acquainted with the Panini Siksā and Taittiriya prātisākhyas. Now we can conclude the basic observations of these siksās and prātisākhyas as follows. Okay? They are, the first one, the theory of syllabification, which discusses minute details regarding avinidhana, incomplete articulation. Second, observations about the pronunciation of ya and va in different positions. Third, observations on nasalization of finals. Fourth, the insertion of a plosive in the group fricative plus nasal consonant. Fifth, the number of vowels as given by the various phoneticians are as follows: 13 in the Rig Prātisākhyā and Atharva Prātisākhyā, 16 in Taittiriya Prātisākhyā, 22 in Panini Siksā, and 23 in Vajasani Prātisākhyā and Rig Tantra Vyakarana. Sixth, careful descriptions of the organs of pronunciation, recognition of the prominent part played by the human tongue into the tip, blade, middle, and the back of the tongue. Seventh, interesting observations regarding the place of origin of ra. According to Prātisākhyas, the place of origin of ra is alveolar or dental, teeth or teeth-rich. The Panini Siksā, however, describes the place of origin of ra, cerebral. Eighth, the relationship between vowels and consonants is analyzed in detail. The nature of Vedic accent is treated as musical, and the later 7 musical notes, Shadaza, etc., were evolved from these 3, Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarit. Vedic accent, namely Udatta, acute, Anudatta, grave, and Swarita, circumflex. So, some of the siksās also made interesting observations on doubling of consonants in incomplete articulations and consonant groups. The last one, the role of voicing and mouth aperture, the process of nasalization, and the nature of stops as consonants were well recognized by the treatise on phonetics, and that is by the siksās and prātisākhyas. Thank you.